This video is a replay of a trade I took today. Now, it probably goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. I am not a financial advisor, and trading entails risk. Just because I got these results today doesn't mean that I can get these every day, nor that you can. Remember, the entire premise of the investing project and the $1 million experiment is that I am not an expert, and yet I am learning how to do this. So for heaven's sake, don't just blindly copy me. Instead, find a mentor, someone who is an expert, and join their community. Pay for their mentorship. This approach has worked very well for me, and it likely will for you too. So use this video partly as education and partly as inspiration. After all, if I can learn this, you can too. All right, so today were a couple of decent trades, some execution missteps though, but by and large not terrible. So I decided, learning from yesterday, I did not, or it wasn't yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah, I think it was yesterday. I did not try to get in too soon this time around. I actually waited a little longer, and it was around 8:30 or so Pacific time, so 2 hours after market open, that the setups actually happened. So I decided to get in on both the Russell, the M2K, and the YM, the MYM here, and I got into them when it finally appeared like the Nasdaq and the S&P were starting to finally turn a little bit green, and it took the S&P getting all the way down to the low end of its average true range, kind of revisiting the pre-market low. And you can see here that the YM was way below its ATR. So if you actually look at let's look at the hourly here. You can see the ATR, the average true range here. The high was way up here. The previous day's low was down here. The average true range low was down here. The pre-market low was even lower, and it was still dropping. So it was the most extended. Now the Russell less so, but it was also down here around its average true range low, in fact below it. So when it looked like the S&P and the Nasdaq were finally starting to rebound, that's when I ended up getting in. And I got in on both of these, but I didn't quite trust it. And part of the problem I've had recently is when I go and put on a trade with full size, and I'm not quite confident that this is a good time to put it on, I end up sabotaging myself by manually moving the stop to even too soon, and then it just stops me out, and I'm not in the trade. That's not great. So what I've done here, and I think this was a good thing, is I lowered the position size all the way down to 2 contracts. Now, I had room to put on a full contract, in fact, more than the 6 full. But that's only if I really believed this was an A+ setup and I really wasn't that confident. So dropping it down to 2 gave me the peace of mind to say, I don't really care. 2 contracts on the MYM or on the M2K amounts to $100, and I'm willing to take that chance. And in fact, when I put these on, the MYM was only a $70 of risk, and the Russell was only $49 of risk. I was able to tighten it up very tight. Now, that also was my undoing on the Russell, as we'll see in a second. I'm going to play this, and what we'll see here is when we get into the Russell, which is momentarily here. Let's just see how we do it. I think the Russell was first. Yes. You can see how much I moved. I could move the stop. I moved it right up to the bottom here. That was a mistake, by the way. I should have given it some room. I should have given it some room to breathe. But I thought, nah, if it comes all the way down here, then I was just wrong and it wasn't ready yet. That was a mistake. I should have given it room because it came down and it stopped me right up. There it is. I'm out. So I took the $49 loss. Whereas with the YM, I also snugged it up. That was also a mistake, but because it had been pulled so far down, it didn't actually make me pay for that mistake. It actually it never tested it, and it just went on back up. So in both cases, I shouldn't have snugged it up that much. I should have factored in some breathing room so that it can come down. And for the Russell, I mean, it came down, stopped me out, then it came down just a shade lower, like not by much. What you're seeing right here, right now, that was it. And then it turned around and went up and had a wonderful, what would have been a wonderful trade with me not in it, sadly. However, so live and learn. I needed to give it at least a little bit of breathing room there. And so that's something I should do different. I will do differently in the future. But anyway, in the meantime, we can see what was going on here. So I paid the $49 for the Russell, and I was willing to pay the $70 here for the YM. As it turns out, it went ahead and did its thing. And in fact, let me up the speed here to the maximum. It took a little while, but it actually once it started moving, and the Nasdaq and the S&P decided to get on with their day, it moved up there reasonably quickly. It did trigger my first stop, my first target rather, and so that was on the two contracts. That was $100. Not a big deal, but you know, better than a poke in the eye. And then as it continued up, it got maybe about 3/4 of the way to the second target and then retraced. And because this was starting to trail one of the contracts behind the high, as you'll see in a second, there it goes. This trailed up a fair ways, and it ended up coming back. Well, so the first one it trailed, and I took my target out. The second one, I manually, once the first target had been hit, I manually moved the stop to, actually I used the 15-minute as the guide. I manually moved the stop up to the bottom of the preceding 15-minute candle until it eventually took me out. And so I ended up with, I think, what did I end up with? $187.50 on the YM and a $49 loss on the M2K. The end result of this whole exercise was $138. So you know what? Nothing to write home about. It could have been a substantially larger win had I been full size, but like I said, I wasn't really that confident in it. And this is one of those things that if I'm one of the better ways to handle being not quite sure whether this is you know, the right trade or not, or the right timing, is if the location's good and the setup's good, you should take the trade anyway. But if you're not quite confident, lower the size. That way you have the you know, intestinal fortitude to stay in the trade. Now you can see what I've done here. I've moved the stop up to the bottom of the preceding 15-minute candle. And now I didn't put it up there right away to the next one because I wanted to give it some room. And I didn't want to crowd it and force it to take me out early. But once it starts moving, I'd moved it up. I'm just not quite sure when I did that. We'll find out in a second here. There we go. Okay, so at this point, I think I'm moving this up to the bottom there. And I don't 100% remember exactly. Now that we're getting close to the point where this was as high as it got. I think it got just a little bit further. And I believe that I ended up taking it right to 586. I think that's where I was. That's 585. I think it was at 586. There we go. That's exactly where I was. Now, I don't believe I got any further than that. So, you know what? And this was kind of a very slow day. Not much action today. Yeah, I think this is it. You know, it's interesting. It came right down just about, and then I thought, oh wow, wouldn't it be something if it came within a tick? But then it came back down. All right, so I'm out. This was a $138 day. Like I said, nothing much to write home about, but better than a loss.